There's a reason you start strong and stall out. It's not weakness, it's not laziness, it's not lack of character. It's wiring, and wiring can be reworked. Your brain is not just a container for thoughts. It's a highly adaptable system that either supports discipline or sabotages it. The truth is, discipline isn't something you're born with or without. It's something your nervous system can be trained to execute, just like a muscle, just like a reflex, just like breath. Discipline is not some mystical gift granted at birth to the chosen few, nor is it a matter of raw willpower that runs on inspiration alone. It is a repeatable, trainable, biologically anchored process that lives within the circuitry of your nervous system. The human brain was designed through evolution to conserve energy, to seek ease, to avoid pain, but it was also shaped to respond to adversity with adaptation. Inside your brain, deep within the neural networks, are systems that can be trained like muscles to choose hard things, to override impulse, and to endure when comfort calls. Discipline is the outcome of those systems being refined, reinforced, and reactivated daily. When people fail to stay consistent, it is rarely because they lack desire. It's because their biology is not aligned with their goals. The neural patterns that promote discipline require friction and resistance to grow stronger, just like the body does in physical training. Neurons that fire together wire together, and when you choose the hard path repeatedly, the wiring of your brain begins to shift from passivity to pursuit, from avoidance to action. You begin to become the kind of person who does not flinch in the face of discomfort but leans in, knowing that the resistance is a signal of growth, not a stop sign. The basal ganglia, a structure in the brain associated with habits and action initiation, learns through repetition and reward. If you set your brain to expect only ease, you are programming the system to collapse under pressure. But if you anchor it in small, repeatable acts of discipline, waking up when you said you would, moving your body when you'd rather scroll, working when your mind tempts you to wait, you are re-sculpting the brain's automatic patterns. Over time, those patterns become stronger than your excuses. There is a holy rhythm to this kind of consistency. You no longer need to negotiate with yourself in the morning or muster a feeling to get going. The ritual itself has replaced the argument. Your brain learns to act because action has become familiar, predictable, and biologically rewarding. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, is strengthened each time you delay gratification, each time you override the primitive call for ease. This is not a matter of mere grit. This is neuroplasticity in motion. And when that part of your brain becomes dominant, you shift the very landscape of who you are. You go from reacting to life to orchestrating it. You wake up no longer as a leaf in the wind, but as the architect of your internal world. And here's what's extraordinary. The more you train discipline at the biological level, the less effort it takes to act. What felt impossible before becomes default. This is not magic. It is physiology submitted to a higher calling. It is brain chemistry in service of becoming more than the body wants to be. It is turning the fleeting moment of discomfort into the eternal building blocks of identity. Every act of discipline, no matter how small, begins in the battle between two brain systems. Limbic system, which seeks immediate comfort, and the prefrontal cortex, which sees long-term purpose. When you feel that internal resistance, that desire to hit snooze, delay the work, skip the challenge, that's not weakness. That's neurochemistry doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect you from perceived threat and conserve energy. But growth, real growth, only happens when you learn to move through that resistance rather than around it. Discipline isn't about feeling ready, it's about learning to act regardless of feeling. That shift from emotion-driven decisions to mission-driven action is the very definition of rewiring your brain. Inside the anterior cingulate cortex lies a system that detects conflict. It senses when your actions are out of alignment with your goals. When you train discipline, you heighten the sensitivity of that internal system. You become more aware of when you're drifting and you course correct faster. But that correction isn't automatic. It's trained through thousands of micro decisions that reinforce the link between effort and identity. You stop asking yourself, "Do I feel like it?" and start declaring, "This is what I do." Over time, your identity catches up with your behavior. You stop performing discipline and start embodying it. You become the kind of person who doesn't just endure hardship, but hunts it, because you've learned that the obstacle is not in the way, it is the way. Your brain thrives on pattern recognition. If you consistently choose short-term ease, you reinforce the neural loops that make avoidance your default. But when you intentionally introduce challenge, cold exposure, physical training, focused work, and pair that challenge with a sense of meaning or purpose, you're teaching your nervous system that discomfort equals growth, not danger, that pairing rewires your dopamine system. It stops releasing only in moments of pleasure and begins to fire in anticipation of effort. You become addicted to the process instead of the prize. That's the shift that separates the mentally fragile from the mentally forged. You begin to crave the climb more than the peak. This isn't motivational, it's mechanical. Your neurobiology is waiting for instruction. If you don't train it, the world will with distraction, with indulgence, with apathy. But if you decide that your life is a mission, not a mood, then every breath, every rep, every moment of resistance becomes a rep for your brain. You are not trying to be disciplined. You are building the hardware for discipline inside your body. Through repetition, through alignment, through neurochemical recalibration, you rewire yourself into someone who does not run from the hard thing, but runs toward it, because you've tasted what happens when you do. You've seen the version of yourself that waits, and now you're ready to become the version that moves. Discipline is not the absence of distraction. It's the ability to redirect attention again and again, regardless of emotional state or external circumstance. And at the core of this ability lies one of the most powerful tools of your biology, your visual system. What you focus on with your eyes literally, where you direct your gaze, shifts your internal state. When your eyes are darting, scanning, unfocused, your nervous system interprets that as chaos, as stress, as threat. But when you fix your gaze, when you hold your visual attention steadily on a single point, your brain begins to calm the inner storm. You move out of a reactive state and into a deliberate one, and that shift from reflex to resolve is the gateway to discipline. This is not a metaphor, it's physiology. The neurons in your retina are connected directly to the same brain areas that regulate alertness, stress, and motivation. When you control your gaze, you influence your arousal levels. And when you master that input, you start to master the internal outputs, your ability to sit in discomfort, to resist the urge to quit, to push through without splintering under pressure. It's in the eyes and it's in the breath. And it's in the posture of someone who has made a decision not to let emotion dictate direction. This kind of control isn't about suppression, it's about recalibration. It's about using your body to shift your mind. Think about what happens in moments of extreme challenge. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your mind floods with doubt. And yet, when you fix your gaze, you take back control. You tell your nervous system, "I'm not running. I'm not escaping, I'm anchoring." That anchor becomes the difference between impulsive action and intentional follow-through. Over time, this practice, steady gaze, conscious breathing, controlled posture, becomes a ritual. And rituals train the brain to know what's coming next. They reduce cognitive load. They provide structure when motivation disappears. In this way, discipline becomes embodied, not just something you decide to do, but something your physiology is primed to perform. Most people think of discipline as mental toughness alone, but the truth is, it starts in the body. Your ability to direct your physical state becomes the foundation for directing your mental one. And the more you train it deliberately, repetitively, even when it feels small or pointless, the more your brain builds the neural scaffolding for resilience. You are not just pushing through, you are imprinting. You are constructing circuits of control, circuits of effort, circuits of clarity under fire. And the person who trains like this, who lives like this, doesn't need perfect conditions. They don't wait for silence, for time, for inspiration. They create the internal structure that makes action possible, even when everything around them says stop. Resistance is not the enemy, it is the signal. The very sensation of not wanting to do the thing, of feeling friction between intention and action, is the biological marker of the exact place you need to train. Inside the brain, that friction is processed through the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, a region built to detect difficulty, to sense effort, and to prepare the body to act anyway. When you feel that hesitation, that pull toward ease, it is not a sign of weakness, it is the activation of a circuit that, if embraced instead of avoided, grows stronger. The problem is not that resistance shows up. The problem is when you mistake resistance for a wall instead of seeing it as a doorway. And every time you walk through that doorway, you teach your nervous system something sacred. We do hard things not by accident, not when we feel like it, but by design. Discomfort is the currency of neuroplasticity. You don't grow by doing what's easy. You grow by doing what feels impossible and doing it anyway. That process is encoded in your biology. When you push into resistance, your brain releases neuromodulators like norepinephrine and acetylcholine, chemicals that amplify focus, strengthen memory, and mark the moment as meaningful. These chemicals are not released when you scroll, when you numb, when you escape. They are released in the heat of the decision, the choice to move forward when everything inside you wants to pull back. That is the furnace where discipline is forged, not through comfort, but through voluntary confrontation with challenge. The reward isn't at the end, it's in the act of leaning in, because that's when you reclaim agency. That's when you stop being run by unconscious patterns and start rewriting them. You don't wait for motivation. You don't negotiate with the feeling. You step forward, and in doing so, you shift the chemistry of your brain in real time. You literally rewire what discomfort means. It no longer signals avoidance, it becomes a call to rise. And once you've trained that enough times, your system starts to crave that signal. You begin to hunt it, not recklessly, but intentionally, because you've learned that every time you move through it, you become more than you were the moment before. Most people see resistance and retreat, but those who understand the science and choose to live it begin to interpret resistance as alignment. It's how you know you're not stuck in the loop of comfort. It's how you know you've stepped onto the edge of growth. You use the resistance as a compass. You stop fearing it, you study it, you breathe into it, and with each breath, you push the boundaries of who you thought you were. This is the anatomy of inner strength. It's not about suppressing fear or avoiding difficulty. It's about meeting both with presence, with readiness, with the deep biological knowing that this is how new neural circuits are born. Discipline is not about punishment, it's about precision. It's the ability to harness your internal state, regardless of external circumstances, and deploy your behavior in alignment with long-term goals. And the truth is, your biology is built for this. Inside your prefrontal cortex lies the circuitry responsible for executive control, the power to override impulse, delay gratification, and make decisions that serve not the self of the moment, but the self of the mission. Every time you resist a distraction, every time you hold the line against temptation, you're strengthening this cortical network. You're not just surviving your impulses, you're sculpting your identity. You are becoming someone the future can count on. But here's the deeper reality: discipline is not a finite resource. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. It grows through repetition, through intentional exposure to discomfort, through rituals that train your nervous system to associate structure not with restriction, but with liberation. When you wake up and train, not because you feel like it, but because it's what you do, that's neuroplasticity in motion. When you build systems that reduce friction between intention and execution, like blocking distractions, scheduling deep work, stacking habits, you are wiring discipline into your environment, into your behavior, into your very physiology. You are no longer a product of circumstance. You are the architect of your own internal reality. The myth is that discipline comes from some magical well of willpower. The truth is, it comes from clarity and strategy. Your brain needs targets, rhythms, structure, and when you provide those, it responds. The dopaminergic system begins to release reward not just for the goal, but for the effort. You begin to find meaning in the process. You start craving the structure that used to feel suffocating. Why? Because the brain doesn't want ease, it wants direction. It wants activation with purpose, and discipline is the code that unlocks it. It is the signal that says, I choose to direct my energy towards something greater than impulse. And there is something holy about that choice. Because the world is saturated with noise, with endless access to comfort, with constant invitations to fragment your attention. But to stand in the fire of your focus, to hold your line in the middle of chaos, that is a sacred act. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, but it's transformative. And every time you do it, you're training more than just your habits, you're awakening a deeper version of yourself, one that doesn't just dream, but executes, one that doesn't wait, but moves, one that knows the body is temporary, but the legacy of effort is eternal. When you begin to understand discipline as a biological process, not just a mindset, everything changes. Deep in your brain, the anterior mid, cingulate cortex and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex play critical roles in effort-based decision-making. These regions communicate with your limbic system, particularly the amygdala, to balance emotional impulses with rational action. That means every time you face resistance, whether it's the snooze button, the sugar craving, or the temptation to quit, a neurobiological battle is underway. And the outcome is not determined by willpower alone, but by the consistency with which you've trained those circuits to respond. Discipline is not about crushing desire. It's about rechanneling that energy into meaningful pursuit. It's essential to realize that dopamine isn't just the molecule of pleasure, it's the molecule of pursuit. When you learn how to time and trigger dopamine not from rewards, but from effort itself, you gain a sustainable drive that doesn't rely on motivation. This shift happens when your brain begins to associate effort with identity, when you stop saying, I have to, and start saying, this is who I am. The neuroscience of discipline teaches us that identity is not fixed, it's a feedback loop. Action reinforces belief, which reinforces action. The more you act disciplined, the more your brain rewires to believe you are disciplined, and eventually that belief becomes embodied not as theory, but as instinct. Biologically, the most disciplined people are not the ones with the least fear or fatigue. They are the ones who have trained their nervous systems to interpret those sensations differently. Elevated heart rate, sweaty palms, muscle tension, these aren't signs of weakness. They're signals that your body is mobilizing energy. They're not the enemy, they're fuel. When you stop interpreting challenge as threat and start interpreting it as readiness, you flip the stress response from a limitation into a weapon. This reframing doesn't happen overnight, but through breathwork, visualization, repetition, and deliberate exposure to pressure, your nervous system begins to adapt. You begin to embody the posture of someone who moves forward when others freeze, and that posture is everything. Because your physiology influences your psychology, your breath rate controls your brain state. Your eye position shifts your internal focus. Your muscular tone sends signals back to your brain about confidence, energy, and direction. Discipline, then, is not a mental game, it's a full-body ritual. It's encoded in how you breathe under pressure, how you stand in stillness, how you speak to yourself in the dark moments. It's in the micro decisions: do you delay or do you deploy? Do you react or do you regulate? That moment between impulse and action is where discipline lies. And that space, that tiny, holy gap, is where transformation begins.